Chapter 2. So you seek knowledge of the dragon, eh? Aleph nodded to the old hag as she poked at the smoldering fire, sending hot sparks up the chimney. I've already told you that twice. Do you have any information or not? He asked impatiently, and none too cordially. He had been in her foul hut for too long, in the presence of someone not much cleaner than her home. The witch woman stank as much as the half-rotten carcass she had been gnawing on when he arrived at her dwelling. Aleph knew his sword would do little to harm a dragon like the one he sought. Without a large army, he knew of only 2 ways to defeat the great beast: magic and knowledge. After 2 weeks of searching towns and asking bewildered and oft-frightened townspeople, he heard of Vera, the witch. After a 6-day ride, he reached her. Despite his distaste for magic, he conceded it might be his only path to victory. Through rumor, stories, and finally some guesswork, Aleph located a small wooden hut in the southern edge of the great swamp. It seemed that many knew of the foul woman, though none knew exactly where she lived. He soon discovered she was not a witch per se, but a more than slightly mad, evil old woman who had some magical abilities. More importantly, she possessed a great deal of knowledge about things in and around the swamp. She also stank more than anyone he had ever met, alive or dead. In his knightly days, Aleph would have felt it his duty to rid the land of such a person as the one on the rickety stool before him. She was old, though no telling exactly how old. She was covered in filth that he imagined came from both her lifestyle and lack of hygiene. The rags she wore for clothing looked as if they had been washed in bog mud. They hung so loosely around her body that when she moved a certain way, the cloth failed to cover what lay underneath. Aleph looked around the interior of the hut again, noting the remains of many animals and bones hanging about or lying on the floor. Human and non-human skulls and bones adorned the outside and the inside of the hut, and he noted that many had tooth marks on them where something had gnawed them, even the human ones. He had no doubt what or who made those marks. Vera cackled at his tone and poked the embers again. "I can give ye what you seek, knight," she said insolently. "I'm no knight, hag, though I grow tired of waiting." "No knight in name, but thee are one none the less. A knight errant on a mission of revenge for 2 innocent lives now and one before. Thee hunts 2 beasts, one magical by nature, the other magical not by nature. The 2 are not connected other than by sending you where the fates deem." She smiled, showing a dark gum line with few teeth, and those were rotten. Vera twisted a strand of her filthy gray hair with her left hand, toying with a small animal skull braided there. "What have ye to offer me?" He frowned. He had already explained that he had the wealth to pay for information he sought. Then he realized what her tone and the look in her bloodshot eyes meant. She was hungry, but for what he was not sure. If he faced a choice between betting her or being consumed by her, he would take the latter and be grateful. "I have money, as I have said." He ignored her looks and stench. "If you want gold or silver, fine. I can even give you gems if you prefer. But I am beginning to wonder why you're wasting my time." The gray head nodded slightly as a quiet, evil giggle sounded. "Forgive a lowly old wench for wanting to prolong the stay of such gratifying company. We'll settle on a price later." Her tone became more collected. "Hear this and learn, for I speak of your more immediate quest. As you may know, the Red Mountains bear the highest peak in Norval, its top having never been seen because a layer of clouds forever clings to it." He nodded. "I have heard many tales about the peak of Turan." Ferris spat. "Pfft! Myths and drunkards' tales. What I tell ye is the truth, just as I sit here. Know ye that over 100 years ago, a cavalier called Toran went forth to the Red Mountains to seek the secrets of the peak. With the arrogant confidence of his own abilities and his magical armor and blade, he climbed to the summit. Then the peak was named after an actual person, he asked with interest. Few knew how the peak came by its name, and those who said they did told different tales. Aye, 'tis said that not long after Turan scaled the mountains, loud rumbles like those from a tempest could be heard. Rocks fell from the mountainside and fire lit the clouds. Then all was silent. Turan was not seen for days, but when he was found, he was but a shadow of the man he had been. He was seen stumbling through the woods. Scorch marks covered his bruised, torn body from head to toe. His armor was gone, and his fingers were worn to the bone. His once raven hair was white from fear, great enough to send his mind to the ether world before his body. Vera leaned closer, her foul breath making him hold his own. Turan died 3 days later, while under the care of the priests of the Brotherhood of Sharta. Her tone was of utter abhorrence for the Brotherhood. His mind returned to him scant moments before he died, long enough for the one word he spoke, since he was found the only word he'd speak before his death. None knew what it meant did, but many in Norval do now. And that word, Vorta. She sat back on her stool. Vorta, he looked at her. The dragon's name? She nodded. Not just any dragon. This is an old, nearly ancient dragon. Turan was lucky to survive that initial battle. For such a mighty dragon, why have I never heard of him before now? Surely someone knew of his existence. The shaggy, great-haired woman nodded. Aye, he was well known in the lands northeast of Norval, on the other side of the Red Mountains. Northeast of the Red Mountains? You mean past the desert of Shaihala? For he knew of no other land beyond the desert. Nay, knight, I speak of what was once the pastures and farmlands of Shaihala. Long before even thy own great-great-grandfather was thought in the young girl who gave birth to him, Shaihala was a prosperous green land until Vorta came. He was but a younger dragon. He found those fields and farmlands suited his taste. He took what he wanted and burned the rest. Aleph shook his head slowly. The desert is a fortnight's journey across, mayhaps more. Are you saying that one dragon turned fertile land into that god-forsaken place of sand and rock? I did not say he did it overnight, she snapped. But yes, Vorta's the reason for that desert. And you'd best be careful when speaking of the gods, she smiled and eyed him. You want to face a dragon that's near 180 feet long, with a wingspan that blots out the sun and creates whirlwinds as he flies. He has jaws large enough to swallow a horse in one snap, and his teeth are the thickness of a tankard, and as sharp as a well-honed blade. You may need to call upon thy gods, should you be foolish enough to face him. Aye, I'll face that monster, he said grimly. That hellspawn killed my family and destroyed my life. He has surely done so to many others as well. That he has. Many a year's crop, and the farmers who tended them have turned to ash from his fiery breath, as well as untold amounts of forest. There will be starvation aplenty if the creature isn't slain. Then tell me what I need to know so I can stop him. I can't tell ye what you wish to know. There is a way to find out, though, if you're willing to make a journey that might be more dangerous than facing the dragon. That is, 'tis a place in a great swamp only known to a rare few. 'Tis called Mirror Lake. He who gazes into its waters on the night of the new moon will see visions of what is to come. Ye may find answers there, but... She paused, her eyelids closing and fluttering for a moment before she opened them to gaze directly at him. I can tell ye that kill the dragon, ye will not. His hand moved toward his dagger. He was not sure if that last bit was a threat or something else. "What do you mean I won't be the one who kills the dragon?" "I did not say ye won't have a hand in it, only that it shall not be ye that delivers the death blow." He relaxed slightly. "I don't care who kills the damn thing, as long as it's dead." "It shall be that. As to the other monster that thou seeks, he is already dead, but still walks the land. Know that if ye seekest him, he may well yet end what ye may deem thy third life. Beyond that, I cannot help ye in that quest, but for the dragon, I can." Vera rose and rummaged about the room, casting aside clay pots, platters of wood, and bone. After a brief search, she snapped up something from a corner table. Quickly she sat down, holding a dirty piece of parchment and a sharp quill pen. She jabbed a point into her palm and drew a rough map using her own blood as ink, humming slightly to herself. Aleph was aghast. Again his hand moved toward the hilt of his dagger. He did not enjoy the enthusiasm with which she jabbed at herself and continued drawing. Since the map was probably the last bit of information he would get from the old woman, he determined that if she planned to attack him, it had to be soon. Finally she finished her gruesome task and handed him the parchment, smiling at his revulsion. "This will take ye to Mirror Lake, if ye can make the journey safely." The former knight glanced at the map long enough to see if the bloody scrawls were sufficient for him to go by. It was a rough map, but it was not impossible to follow. True to her word, the lake was deep inside a dangerous swamp. Despite the danger of the swamp, he was more worried about the time factor. By his estimate, it was only 4 days until the next new moon, and the distance to the lake seemed like it would take at least 2 days over the best terrain, which was far from an accurate description of the swamp. He finally decided it would be a 3-day ride. He stood, careful not to roll the map and smear the drawing. "I'll take my leave now. What do I owe you for this information?" She stood as well, a glint in her eyes. "Well now, ye saw how I made the map. You could repay me in a like manner." Before he could answer, she leaped at him with a strength that belied her age. Caught off guard by the speed of the attack, he fell against the hut wall. Sharpened fingernails reached for his throat and nearly tore open the skin before he kicked hard enough to send her backward. He stood, his sword singing as it left the scabbard. "I have no great desire to kill you, hag," he said coldly. "You have given me information I can use, but you will not receive the payment you so desire." She said nothing, though she raised her hands like an eagle raising its talons before a strike. Then she began to change. Her hair became longer and mangier. Areas of exposed skin began growing hair too. She snarled, showing that her decayed teeth were growing longer. "By the gods," Aleph said, watching her transform. He suddenly realized that if he allowed the transformation to reach its conclusion, his own life would do the same. With one thrust, sharp steel sank into her ribcage. A howl, like that of a mortally wounded wolf, filled the hut, then silenced as the creature slid off his blade. He stared at her as she sank into the floor, changing to her original form. With a look of disgust, he spat on the dead form. Such deception and evil were what he expected from magic users in general. Deciding that the hut was probably as polluted as his tenant, he'd walked to the smoldering fire. Grasping a dry stick from a pile of kindling, he stuck the end into the flame until it spawned a small blaze of its own. Withdrawing the firebrand, he saw an oil lamp among the foul collections scattered about. He poured oil on the firewood and set it ablaze before he walked out. He mounted his horse, glanced at the map again, and studied the blue sky beyond the overhanging tree limbs. Seeing his direction, he urged his mount forward without a backward glance at the burning hut. That was unfortunate. If he had bothered to look back, he may have glimpsed the arm that reached around the corner of the doorway to grasp the frame and drag the rest of the body from the burning hut. Once she was clear of the doorway, Vera stopped. Her hate-filled eyes watched Aleph ride into the distance before she collapsed on the soil of the swamp.